gonna guess that most of you don't follow Indian media or read Indian news. But if you do, you are no doubt aware of the worsening diplomatic battle between the Indian government and the Canadian government. The war of words brewing between Justin Trudeau and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Although Canada-India relations have been miserable ever since Justin Trudeau rocked up in New Delhi dressed as a 19th century Maharaja, things have gone much worse in just the past few months. This is mainly because of growing aggression being displayed by Khalistanis toward the Indian government in Canada, the United States, and the United Kingdom. Khalistanis are Sikh Indians who advocate for a breakaway Sikh ethno-state in the Indian province of Punjab. You're likely now asking yourself why you should care and why I'm talking about it right now. Well, it's time somebody calls out the undeniable reality that the Liberal government, and Justin Trudeau in particular, has very close ties to Khalistani factions in Canada, and is no doubt pandering to these factions in order to secure electoral votes in Canada. In fact, the Indian government is making those direct accusations to Justin Trudeau as we speak, accusing Trudeau of being driven by what they call vote bank politics. Now, the real question behind all of this is at what point is Justin Trudeau willing to sacrifice Canada's reputation with the largest democracy in the world just to stay in power in Canada? Well, quite frankly, it looks as though he's willing to go all the way. Over the next 10 or 12 minutes, we're going to dive into the backstory of what's been driving this worsening diplomatic dispute over the past 2 months between Canada and India. And we're also going to get into Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh's close ties to Khalistani factions in Canada. Now, this is receiving wall-to-wall coverage in India right now, but is basically being blacked out by Canadian media. So we're going to try and figure out what is going on. Drop a like in the video, help us out by subscribing to the True North YouTube channel, and the comment question for the episode is this: is Justin Trudeau too close to Khalistanis in Canada? Let me know in the comments, and let's get into it. Here is the Indian External Affairs Minister last week taking a direct shot at Justin Trudeau and the Canadian government for being soft on Khalistani extremists in our country, and for being captured by what they call vote bank politics, pandering to Sikhs in Canada for votes by not taking seriously the issue of Khalistanis. Take a listen.
How Canada has dealt with the Khalistani issue has been a long-standing concern, because very frankly, they seem to be driven by vote bank politics. And their responses have all been, to the best of my understanding, actually constrained by what they regard as vote bank compulsions on them. We made it very clear, and I've done so sometimes even in public, which is that if there are activities which are permitted from Canada, which impinge on our sovereignty, territorial integrity, on our security, then, we will have to respond.
In response, here is Justin Trudeau saying that India is wrong to make that accusation and that Canada has always taken seriously terrorism and threats of terrorism in our country.
Prime Minister, we've seen a parade float depict the assassination of Indira Gandhi and posters calling on people to kill India. The Indian government says you're being soft on Sikh extremism because you rely on votes from that community. How can you demonstrate to them that they're wrong?
They are wrong. Canada has always taken extremely seriously violence and threats of violence. We've always taken serious action against terrorism, and we always will. We have an extremely diverse country, and freedom of expression is something that we have, but we will always make sure that we are pushing back against violence and extremism in all its forms.
So what exactly is the backstory here? What has been going on? Well, for weeks, posters have been circulating around Canada depicting the Indian government as the killers of a man named Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Nijjar was a man on India's most wanted list, and in June he was gunned down outside of his Gurdwara, a temple in Surrey, British Columbia. Nijjar was allegedly the leader of the Khalistan Tiger Force, a group that the Indian government has labeled as a terrorist organization. Posters, however, are quite inflammatory. As you can see, it says "Kill India," and it also has the names and faces of the Toronto Consul General and the Indian High Commissioner, accusing them of being the killers of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Khalistanis in Canada also believe that the Indian government is behind the deaths of two other high-profile and prominent Khalistani leaders, one in the United Kingdom and one in Pakistan. The 3 deaths of these Khalistani leaders, all of whom were on India's most wanted list, happened within a 45-day period, raising suspicion. Now, there is no evidence to state that India is behind the killing of either of these 3 men, but if it is true that they are behind the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, well, that is a serious issue. We can't just have foreign governments carrying out extrajudicial executions in our country. It is just simply not on, and if it is true, they should be held responsible. But it's also possible that the Indian government has nothing to do with this. It could be that Hardeep Singh Nijjar was wrapped up in gang violence. Last year, 9 of British Columbia's 11 most wanted individuals were in fact Punjabi. So it is possible that in fact Nijjar was just wrapped up with the wrong crowd. But since the deaths of these 3 individuals, Khalistanis in Canada, the United States, and the United Kingdom have significantly ramped up their aggression toward the Indian government. And that is what brings us to where we are now. A few weeks ago, Khalistani supporters set fire to the Indian consulate in San Francisco. Just earlier, Khalistanis outside the Indian High Commission in London tore down the Indian flag and raised the Khalistani flag outside of the embassy. And before these deaths, the Indian High Commission in Ottawa was attacked by a rowdy group of Khalistanis. Indian media reports that these Khalistanis were using grenades outside of the Indian embassy, while the Ottawa police are investigating smoke canisters being used. Trudeau has refused to condemn the Kill India posters, but Canadian Foreign Minister Melanie Joly did issue a formal condemnation. On June 25th, a prior Khalistan car rally was organized to disrupt a memorial for the Air India bombing, the worst terrorist attack in Canadian history, carried out by a group of Khalistani terrorists led by a man named Talwinder Parmar. 329 passengers and crew were killed in this plane bombing. And this Khalistan car rally poster featured prominently the face of Talwinder Parmar, the terrorist behind the Air India bombing. How respectful to show up to the Air India memorial. And just to top it all off, earlier in June, a parade float circulating around Brampton, Ontario, proudly displayed a tableau of the assassination of Indira Gandhi, the Indian Prime Minister, in the 1980s, carried out by Sikh bodyguards. Again, what a lovely image to depict about your cause. Trudeau refused to condemn any of these incendiary images by Khalistani supporters, citing the right to freedom of expression, which is interesting. Because as you're all well aware, Justin Trudeau couldn't give a tinker's damn when it involves freedom of expression for you and me. You want to protest vaccine mandates here in Canada and do it in a peaceful way? No, here's the Emergencies Act for you. In 2017, Justin Trudeau charged a Saskatchewan man for uttering threats against Justin Trudeau on social media. It wasn't freedom of expression for that Saskatchewan man to utter threats against Trudeau, but it's totally acceptable for people to label the Indian Consul General in Toronto as the killer of a Sikh man in Surrey, British Columbia. That's some freedom of expression for you right there, isn't it? And in December of 2020, Justin Trudeau weighed into the ongoing Sikh farmer protests in India and said that Canada supports their right to freely protest. Again, the hypocrisy is outrageous. It's as if Trudeau will do anything to maintain his support among Sikhs in Canada, even if it means showing himself to be an utter hypocrite in front of the rest of us. But we really have to dive deeper into Justin Trudeau's close ties with Khalistani factions in Canada. But during his disgraced trip to India, where he tried to dress up once again as an Indian Maharaja, he decided to invite a convicted attempted murderer of a Punjabi minister in Canada to this Indian state dinner. His name was Jaspal Atwal. Here he is taking a picture with Justin Trudeau's wife, Sophie Trudeau, who herself also wanted to get in on the mix of dressing up like an Indian. Of course, Trudeau didn't want to take any responsibility for the invitation to an Indian state dinner on Indian soil of an attempted murderer of an Indian politician. Something that is not discussed by many people and not known by many Canadians is that in 2014, before Justin Trudeau became the Prime Minister, the nomination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, the future Defense Minister and now International Development Minister, caused uproar among the moderate Sikh population in British Columbia, triggering the resignation of many Sikhs in the Liberal Party in the province. Hardeep Singh Nijjar is accused of being backed by the World Sikh Organization, a group that openly advocates for Khalistan. According to the Business Standard in 2014, a Sikh moderate in British Columbia named Kashmir Dhaliwal said this about Justin Trudeau: "The Liberal Party, especially Justin, is in bed with extremist and fundamental groups. That's why I decided to leave the Liberal Party." And that was back in 2014, before he became Prime Minister. But it gets even crazier. Despite Sikh extremists being behind the worst terrorist attack in Canadian history, the Air India bombing, in 2019, Justin Trudeau quietly removed any reference to Sikh extremism in the 2018 report on the terrorist threat to Canada. In this 2018 terrorist report threat to Canada, there was a giant 2019 update in blue at the very top of this document. And take a look at this update here. "The government's communication of threats must be clear, concise, and cannot be perceived as maligning any groups. As we continue this review, it is apparent that in outlining a threat, it must be clearly linked to an ideology rather than a community. The government will carefully select terminology that focuses on the intent of ideology. Going forward, the Government of Canada is committed to applying a bias-free approach to the terminology used to describe any threats inspired by ideology or groups." Now, this is to say nothing at all over Jagmeet Singh, the man that is basically responsible for keeping Justin Trudeau in power, the man propping up Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister. Jagmeet Singh isn't even allowed to enter India. They've banned him from entering India. He has since denounced Talwinder Parmar and has accepted that he is responsible for the Air India bombing. But before that, before he made that acceptance, he had denied that Talwinder Parmar was responsible for this bombing. Before Jagmeet Singh entered politics, he was a part of the Sikh activist network, speaking at Khalistani events in California and London. According to their literature, the Sikh activist network, in their words, pledged to fight the oppressive domination of the fascist Indian machinery. There's no doubt that Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh pander to the Sikh base. They are clearly a powerful voting bloc in this country. But the reality is, why are we willing to threaten the relationship of a key ally in India just to make sure that our leaders can stay in power? Is it really worth alienating India when we're dealing with a very serious and growing threat of China? Furthermore, it's time our leaders got some courage and said what needs to be said. These are sectarian battles that Canada has no obligation to host. When people come to Canada, they need to realize that religious harmony is part of our society. We live amongst one another with tolerance and respect. If you have an issue with your home government or your home country, take it up with your home government or home country. Instead of pandering to ethnic groups for votes, why can't our leaders stand up and say, actually, our reputation as a nation, as a reliable partner on the world stage, is more important than your sectarian gripe from a faraway, distant land. Violence from any side should easily be condemned. The depiction of assassinations and murders of political leaders should easily be condemned. We should not have to host these displays at the expense of our own reputation. All it does is hurt Canadians. But as of right now, it looks as though things are only going to get worse. Reminder to let me know in the comments your answer to the comment question: is Justin Trudeau too close to Khalistani factions in Canada? All right, that's going to do it for us today on the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Harrison Faulkner, and this is Ratio.